me be absolutely clear, Shamima Begum is not a victim. My name is Gifford. In December 2014, I left the UK to join Kurdish forces in Syria. For 3 long years, I fought against the Islamic State as a volunteer. I left the country for the last time in late 2017 after we liberated Raqqa, the so-called capital of the Islamic State. I went because I was angry at what the Islamic State was doing to the innocent people of Syria and Iraq. Like everyone at home, I watched as the British humanitarians Alan Henning and David Haines were paraded on TV and murdered by the British terrorist Mohammed Emwazi, also known as Jihadi John. I couldn't sleep at night thinking about the thousands of young Yazidi girls, some as young as 3 years old, that were sold into sexual slavery. As time progressed, an idea began to form in my mind. If more than 1,000 British men and women could go out to Syria to murder and to rape, that it was only right, in the spirit of internationalism, that a few men and women should go out and support local people in their hour of need. This was particularly important as the British government in 2015 was doing little to degrade and destroy ISIS. The ancient communities in the Middle East were being annihilated. ISIS were conducting a campaign of ethnic cleansing. The Kurds, the Syriac Christians, and the proud Yazidis all saw their churches and temples burned. Their men and boys were being shot dead in ditches, and their women were going to the slave markets of Raqqa and Mosul. There was a sense of urgency. If a group on the ground didn't emerge that was capable of defeating ISIS, the death cult would destroy all diversity and culture in Syria and Iraq. To quote The Tempest, "Hell is empty, all the devils are here." So where does Shamima Begum come into the story? A few months after I arrived in Syria, Shamima and a group of her friends left the UK to journey to the Islamic State. Despite the insistence of her lawyers, she was not trafficked by ISIS. According to her own family, her trip involved a great deal of forethought and planning. She lied to her school, to social services and to her family. She stole jewellery to fund her journey, and together with her friends, she travelled 1,000 miles to the heart of the Islamic State. Yes, Shamima was 15 when she committed her first crime in joining the Islamic State, although she was above the age of criminal responsibility. But this isn't about the failure of social services in 2015. This is about keeping the British public safe now. Shamima is no longer the 15-year-old that left the UK. She's a 21-year-old woman that has spent the last 5 years in Syria and Iraq. We don't know the full details of her crimes. Local security experts have said she was a well-known member of the Hizbah, the ISIS police, and that she was seen sewing explosive vests onto ISIS suicide bombers. Her first interview on leaving the so-called Islamic State was her most candid. She talked about heads in bins, daily executions. She rationalised ISIS murder, particularly the brutal deaths of the captured journalists. She made it clear that she only left ISIS territory because she was compelled to. She waited until ISIS was utterly destroyed before she finally surrendered to Kurdish forces. Far from being a vulnerable woman, Shamima has proved herself to be a committed and passionate supporter of the Islamic State. After she was found in Syria, and as the weeks progressed, Shamima was able to speak to her family back in the UK. No doubt it was this that brought on a sudden change of attitude. Her liberty, and indeed her passport, depended on what she said. The black burqa was discarded. Suddenly, a Union Jack pillow found itself strategically placed in her room whenever she gave an interview. There was no more talk of death, no more public declarations of support for the death cult. Instead, she talked about forgiveness and her longing for her family. However, it doesn't take long for her self-obsessed, self-pitying side to come out, particularly when she talks about her human rights and how few people in Britain understood what she'd been through in Syria. There was no sign of utter horror at the barbarity of ISIS. There was no grief for the raped Yazidi girls or the murder of thousands of innocent people. And who are the people supporting her return to the UK? Well, they come from the usual circles on the far left. People genuinely think they're fighting against racism, against a backward and uncaring Conservative party. Stripping Shamima Begum of her citizenship is racist, some say. That's despite the fact that another ISIS terrorist, Jack Letts, a white middle-class man from Oxford, was also stripped of his citizenship after joining ISIS. But amongst all these activists are much more worrying organisations. Groups like CAGE, whose spokesman spent 3 years in Guantanamo Bay and whose research director described Jihadi John as a beautiful young man. The left's growing fondness for these groups is a growing scandal. What the left needs to realise is, you may think you're standing up for worthwhile goals like racism and equality, but unless you choose your causes wisely, you will always be in danger of becoming a very useful idiot to very bad people with very sinister goals. We don't owe Shamima Begum anything. The British public have rights too. The right to kiss your partner goodbye on the underground and know that they'll get to work safe. To drop your kids off at a concert and see their smiling faces when you come and pick them up again. Shamima is just the tip of the iceberg. Allowing her back will open the door to dozens of other fanatical terrorists, men and women a lot worse than Shamima Begum, and they will all use the precedent set by Shamima to challenge the courts and drag this on for many years to come. Already, MI5, which describes Shamima as a real and credible threat, is overworked and underfunded. Why burden them with returning terrorists? Why burden the taxpayer with a bill for millions of pounds as we protect and support Shamima moving forward? There is nothing stopping the British government recognising and supporting a local judicial system that can try Shamima and indeed all the terrorists held by the Kurds. Iraq, a sovereign state and ally of the UK, has offered to try the prisoners themselves. All it would take is political will and an offer of monetary and political support. After all, Iraq and Syria is where Shamima committed her crimes. Taking her out of Syria before she spent time in a Syrian court deprives local people of justice. I have seen the horrors of ISIS up close. When I came home from Syria, I wrote a book called Fighting Evil. That's exactly what we face in Syria. And if we, as a country, allowed Shamima Begum and indeed all the jihadists back into our country, evil is exactly what we'll be inviting in.